You learned early that your needs could wait. Everyone else's couldn't. Not in words, not as a lesson someone sat down and taught you, but through repetition, through experience, through watching what happened when your needs collided with someone else's. You learned, I can wait. And you were right. You could. The problem is what happened after you waited long enough. Most people who always go last don't think of themselves as people who go last. They think of themselves as patient, as selfless, as the kind of person who doesn't make things about themselves. And there is something real in that self-perception. The generosity is real. The care for others is real. The genuine desire to not be a burden is real. But underneath all of that, for many people, is something that was never a choice. It was a conclusion. A conclusion reached early, reinforced often, and eventually absorbed so completely that it stopped feeling like a pattern and started feeling like a personality. It probably didn't start with one large moment. It started with small ones. The times you wanted something, as a child, as a young person, and the environment around you communicated clearly or quietly. Not now. Other things matter more right now. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Maybe it was said with words. Maybe it was just the way energy shifted in the room. When you needed something, the slight withdrawal, the change in tone, the look that said your timing was inconvenient, and you learned to read that. Children are very good at reading what gets rewarded and what creates friction. And what you learned was, needs that are quiet keep things smooth. Wants that wait don't cause problems. The version of you that asked for less got more warmth. So you practiced going last, not as a sacrifice, as a strategy. The most logical response to what you had learned about how the world worked. The problem with a strategy that works is that it becomes a habit. And the problem with a habit that runs long enough is that it becomes who you are. At some point, you couldn't quite remember when you had started going last. It just was. The natural order of things, the way you moved through rooms, the way you responded when options were offered. You choose. It doesn't matter to me. Whatever works for everyone else. And those words were half true. Part of you genuinely didn't mind, but part of you, a quieter part, did mind. Had preferences, had needs, had things it would have chosen if choosing had ever felt fully safe. But that part had gotten quiet, because the strategy had worked for so long that you had started to believe it wasn't a strategy at all. It was just who you were. Here is the part that makes this pattern so difficult to change. The world rewarded you for it. People called you easy, selfless, mature, patient, the kind of person everyone wanted to be around. Because being around you never required anything. They weren't already willing to give. You never made things complicated. You never pushed back at inconvenient times. You never needed more than was convenient to offer. And that made you very comfortable to have in someone's life. But comfortable is not the same as valued. And being easy to have around is not the same as being seen. What people loved was often not you. It was the relief of not having to think about you. The ease of a relationship that asked very little. The convenience of someone who had already decided they could wait. Every time you went last, the people around you learned something. They learned that you could wait, that your needs were flexible, that you would adjust, that the relationship could move at their pace, on their terms, around their priorities, and you would find a way to be okay with that. And so they stopped asking, not out of cruelty, but because you had made it clear, through 100 small accommodations, 100 quiet deferrals, that asking wasn't necessary. You had trained them not to think about what you needed. Not because you wanted that, but because going last had become so automatic that it looked, from the outside, like not needing anything, and the quietest cost of all, the one that took the longest to notice, was this. Eventually, you believed it too. You started to believe that you were someone who could wait indefinitely, who didn't need much, who was fine going last, not because you chose it, but because somewhere along the way, you forgot you had ever had a choice. Here is what was never true: that you naturally belonged last, that your needs were less urgent than everyone else's, that your preferences mattered less, that the right order of things was everyone else first, and you, if there was time, if there was space, if no one needed anything else, somewhere after. That was never the truth. That was a conclusion you reached in an environment that benefited from you reaching it, and conclusions reached in childhood, or in relationships that repeated what childhood taught, feel like facts. They feel like the way things are, like personality, like who you are. But they are not facts. They are patterns. And patterns, unlike facts, can change. If you have spent years going last, I want to offer you something to sit with. Not an instruction. Not a list of things to do differently. Just this. The habit was never putting yourself last. The habit was believing that everyone else naturally belonged ahead of you. That belief is older than you think. It formed before you had words for it, before you had the ability to question it, before you knew there was anything else to believe. It is still there, quiet, familiar, waiting to be noticed, and noticing it, just noticing it, without pressure to change it overnight, is where something different begins.